The Assembly will come back to order. We'll go to Order Business 11, second reading and amendments.
Assembly Bill 249. Assembly Bill 249, introduced by Assemblywoman Huddy. An act relating to construction requiring the governing body of a county or city to establish uniform hours by which construction work may begin on certain land, prohibiting a common interest community from restricting the hours by which construction work may begin in a way that is inconsistent with the permissible hours established by the governing body of the county or city, and providing other measures properly known to the people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 6, end of Section 6, end of bill.
Amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
Amendment 425, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
I have one light up, but that's not the person standing. So, Assemblywoman, no lights up. Assembly Bill 249 has an amendment. Who is going to introduce the amendment? Assemblyman Flores.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 425 to Assembly Bill 249.
Assemblyman Flores has moved. Assembly adopted Amendment 425 to Assembly Bill 249. Remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Amendment number 425 adds in Section 3 of the bill the Executive Board and the governing documents of an association for restricting the hours in which construction may begin during the period beginning on May 1st, ending on September 30th, to any other hours of those which are authorized by any ordinance adopted by the governing body of county or city, amongst other things, Mr. Speaker.
Any further? Assemblyman Flores has moved. Assembly adopted Amendment 425 to Assembly Bill 249. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further members to the bill?
There are none.
Bills are ordered to general file.
Assembly Bill 268, introduced by Assemblyman Krasner et al. Second reading. An act relating peace officers requiring each law enforcement agency to adopt a written policy regarding the use of force, prohibiting a peace officer from using deadly force against a person based on the danger the person poses to himself or herself under certain circumstances, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 4, end of Section 4, end of bill.
Amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
I have Amendment 460, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 460 to Assembly Bill 268.
Assemblyman Flores has moved. Assembly adopted Amendment 460. Assembly Bill 268. Remarks.
My apologies, Mr. Speaker. I'm still going through the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Amendment 460 adds in Section 1 of this bill, which requires each law enforcement agency, not including the Department of Wildlife, to adopt a written policy regarding the use of force and make the written policy available to the public on the internet website maintained by the law enforcement agency, amongst other things.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 460 to Assembly Bill 268, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further members to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 270, introduced by Assemblyman O'Neill et al., Senators Sandra Loop et al., an act relating to state property, revising provisions relating to accounting of certain fees for the use of buildings and grounds of the former Stewart Indian School, revising provisions related to the Silver State Industries Endowment Fund and the Endowment Fund for the Historic Preservation of the Nevada State Prison, authorizing the sale or consumption of beer and wine at certain events held within the historic structures, buildings, and other property of the Nevada State Prison, making various other changes relating to the Nevada State Prison and providing the measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 10, end of Section 10, end of bill.
Members to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
I have Amendment 173, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Assembly Bill 173 to Assembly Bill 270.
Assemblyman Flores moved that the Assembly adopt Amendment 173 to Assembly Bill 270. Remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Amongst other things, this amendment in Section 2.5 of the bill requires the museum director of the Stewart Indian School Cultural Center and museum to enter into an agreement with the state land registrar or any other state agency that receives an assignment of the buildings and grounds on the former Stewart Indian School. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 173 to Assembly Bill 270, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 280, introduced by Assemblywoman Peters et al., enacting public restrooms requiring places of public accommodation, public buildings and facilities owned by a public body, certain areas leased by or on behalf of a public body, and certain leased areas within a state park that provide a single-stall restroom to the public to make a single-stall restroom as inclusive and accessible as possible, revising provisions relating to the signage for such single-stall restrooms, requiring certain governmental entities to include in their building codes or, if applicable, adopt by ordinance a requirement that certain buildings and facilities used by the public that contain a single-stall restroom, which is available to the public, be as inclusive and accessible as possible, and prohibiting certain signage on such restrooms, providing a penalty, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in the Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 15, end of Section 15, end of bill.
Friendly amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
There are none. Sorry. We have Amendment 187.
Assemblyman, sorry. Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 187 to Assembly Bill 280.
Assemblyman Flores moved. Assembly adopt Amendment 187 to Assembly Bill 280. Remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment adds in Section 1 the phrase "to a person of any gender, identity, or expression." And in Section 15.5 of this bill provides that Section 4, 5, and 14, which are the enforcement provisions of this bill, do not become effective until February 1st, 2022.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 187, Assembly Bill 280, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill? Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 296, introduced by Assemblywoman Wynn, enacting into crimes defining certain terms for the purposes of the crime of doxing, establishing the crime of doxing, authorizing that victim of doxing to recover damages reasonable attorney's fees and costs in a civil action, authorizing a court to issue a temporary restraining order or a permanent or temporary injunction under certain circumstances, providing an additional penalty for doxing motivated by certain actual or perceived characteristics of the victim, providing penalties, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 11, end of Section 11, end of bill.
Amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
I have Amendment 320, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Judiciary.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 320 to Assembly Bill 296.
Assemblyman Yeager moved. Assembly adopt Amendment 320, Assembly Bill 296. Remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment deletes Sections 1 through 11 of the bill and also replaces them with two new sections that establish a civil cause of action to recover damages.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 320, Assembly Bill 296, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 299, introduced by Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod and Titus, enacting into wildlife, providing for the issuance of a salvage permit to certain persons for the salvage and possession of certain animals hit and killed by a motor vehicle, imposing certain requirements on a holder of a salvage permit, authorizing a peace officer to make certain inspections, prohibiting a person from selling, bartering, or exchanging the carcass of such an animal, providing that a peace officer agency employing a peace officer and the Department of Wildlife are not liable with respect to any use made of the carcass of such an animal, prohibiting salvaging and taking possession of such animals from the reservation lands of any Indian tribe of the state, providing penalties and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 3, end of Section 3, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 236, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Natural Resources.
Assemblyman Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 236 to Assembly Bill 299.
Assemblyman Watts moved. Assembly adopt Amendment 236 to Assembly Bill 299. Remarks.
Thank you. The amendment revises the requirements for obtaining a permit to salvage an animal killed in a vehicle collision, prohibits salvaging an animal from certain areas, and requires the salvage permit to contain additional information concerning the animal and the person obtaining the permit.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 236 to Assembly Bill 299, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 307, introduced by Assemblywoman Martinez, enacted relating to employment, requiring the preparation of information notices by divisions or other units with the Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation, requiring the director of the department to require certain employers to post such notices in the workplace, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people stated that are represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 2, end of Section 2, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 186, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 186 to Assembly Bill 307.
Assemblyman Flores moved. Assembly adopt Amendment 186 to Assembly Bill 307. Remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment clarifies the Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation will prepare the notice concerning job training, and Labor Commissioner shall make it available to each private employer in the state.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 186 to Assembly Bill 307, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further members of the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 315, introduced by Assemblyman O'Neill et al. An act relating to public employees requiring the employer of a police officer or firefighter to make available certain information and counseling relating to mental health issues to the police officer or firefighter and providing them as appropriately thereto. The people's state of Nevada represented in the Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 3, end of Section 3, end of bill.
Any members to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 289, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 289 to Assembly Bill 315.
Assemblyman Flores moved. Assembly adopt Amendment 289. Assembly Bill 315. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment allows post-retirement counseling to occur upon 3 months after the retirement of a police officer, firefighter, or correctional officer.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 289, Assembly Bill 315, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further members of the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 316, introduced by Assemblyman O'Neill et al., Senators Buck and Settlemeyer, an act relating to veterans requiring the disclosure of certain information concerning certain events and services relating to benefits or entitlements for veterans, creating a cause of action for certain violations of such requirements, providing a civil penalty, and providing other measures appropriately thereto. The people's state of Nevada represented in the Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 6, end of Section 6, end of bill.
Any members to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 290, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 290 to Assembly Bill 316.
Assemblyman Flores moved. Assembly adopt Amendment 290 to Assembly Bill 316. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment revises the size, font, and content of oral and written disclosures and exempts attorney agents accredited by the United States Department of Veteran Affairs.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 290, Assembly Bill 316, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendment is adopted. Any further members of the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 318, introduced by Assemblywoman Marzullo, an act relating to estates replacing provisions relating to certain declaratory relief, exempting certain fiduciaries from the requirement to provide a residential disclosure form in certain circumstances, revising provisions relating to electronic wills, establishing and revising various provisions governing the administration of estates, revising provisions concerning the distribution of small estates, revising provisions relating to compensation of attorneys for personal representatives, revising the definition of the term independent attorney, revising provisions relating to the nomination of a guardian, authorizing a trustee to reimburse a settler for the payment of tax on trust income or principal, revising various provisions concerning trusts and the administration of trusts, requiring that public administrators or similar persons be given certain information relating to a decedent and access to the safe deposit box of a decedent in certain circumstances, authorizing certain entities to charge a reasonable fee for certain, providing certain information to public administrators or similar persons, and providing other measures appropriately thereto. The people's state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 47, end of Section 47, end of bill.
Any members to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 145, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Judiciary.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 145 to Assembly Bill 318.
Assemblyman Yeager moved. Assembly adopt Amendment 145 to Assembly Bill 318. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Amendment 145 revises various provisions relating to trusts and estates to streamline the probate and trust administration process.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 145 to Assembly Bill 318, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 321, introduced by Assemblyman Ferguson and Benitez Thompson, an act relating to elections, establishing procedures for the use of mail ballots in every election, establishing various requirements relating to mail ballots, revising the requirements for signature verification of mail ballots, revising the deadline to submit a request for the establishment of a polling place within an Indian reservation or Indian colony for an election, revising the personal data that may be requested if a voter's signature is challenged at the polls, requiring the Secretary of State to enter into a cooperative agreement with the State Register of Vital Statistics to obtain certain information relating to the statewide voter registration list, authorizing a county clerk, city clerk, or register of voters, or deputies thereof charged with powers and duties relating to elections to request certain personal information be maintained in a confidential manner, repealing provisions relating to absent ballots, mailing ballots in affected elections, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people's state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 92, end of Section 92, end of bill.
Members to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
I have Amendment 276, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections.
Assemblywoman Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt Amendment 276 to Assembly Bill 321.
Assemblywoman Miller has moved to Assembly adopt Amendment 276 to Assembly Bill 321. Remarks?
Yes, it requires a minimum number of polling places by size, requires ballot drop boxes, sets a deadline of 60 days prior to an election to opt out, and clarifies that Indian reservations and colonies may request a polling place.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 276 to Assembly Bill 320, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 326, introduced by Assemblyman Roberts, enacting the cannabis, authorizing the Cannabis Compliance Board to impose certain penalties for engaging in business of a cannabis establishment without a license, and requiring advertising by a cannabis establishment to include the name and license number or other unique identifier of the cannabis establishment, and providing other matters properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 3, end of Section 3, end of bill.
Are there amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
Amendment 195, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Judiciary.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 195 to Assembly Bill 326.
Assemblyman Yeager's moved. Assembly adopt Amendment 195 to Assembly Bill 326. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Amendment 195 deletes Section 1 of the bill, and it also authorizes local jurisdictions to bring an action against a person to recover a civil penalty for each violation and to enjoin such violations.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopted Amendment 195 to Assembly Bill 326, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 330, introduced by Assemblyman Ellison, enacting to professions providing for equivalent credit towards requirements for professional and occupational licenses and certification for certain occupational, vocational, and technical training, and providing other matters properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
Amendment 373, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Commerce and Labor.
Assemblywoman Howdy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 373 to Assembly Bill 330.
Assemblywoman Howdy moved. Assembly adopt Amendment 373 to Assembly Bill 330. Remarks?
Requires each regulatory body in coordination with the Nevada Department of Education and the Nevada System of Higher Education to adopt regulations to effectuate the provisions of the bill rather than the State Board of Education.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of Assembly adopt Amendment 373 to Assembly Bill 330, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 333, introduced by Assemblyman Krasner et al., enacting land use planning, establishing certain requirements for judicial review of certain land use planning decisions of a governing body, commission, or board, exempting the retention or detention of stormwater from certain appropriation procedures under certain circumstances, and providing other matters properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 2, end of Section 2, end of bill.
Are there amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
Amendment 332, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 332 to Assembly Bill 333.
Assemblyman Flores moved. Assembly adopt Amendment 332 to Assembly Bill 333. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment limits the provisions of the bill to be counties with a population between 100,000 and 700,000 and adds a definition for developed stormwater flow.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 332 to Assembly Bill 333, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 336, introduced by Assemblyman Monroe Moreno and Roberts, enacting peace officers, requiring the peace officer standards and trading commission to adopt regulations establishing standards for an annual behavioral health care assessment for peace officers and providing other matters properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 2, end of Section 2, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a
I
whole?
have Amendment 308, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 308 to Assembly Bill 336.
Assemblyman Flores moved. Assembly adopt Amendment 308 and Assembly Bill 336. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment replaces healthcare assessment with wellness visit and changes the effective date to January 1, 2023.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 308 to Assembly Bill 336, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 339, introduced by Assemblywoman Nguyen, enacting crimes authorizing a just court or municipal court to establish a program of treatment for a defendant who is charged with misdemeanor battery, which constitutes domestic violence, enacting various provisions pertaining to the program of treatment, eliminating the prohibition on plea bargaining by a prosecuting attorney of a person who is charged with battery, which constitutes domestic violence, and providing other matters properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 11, end of Section 11, end of bill.
Are there amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 321, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Judiciary.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 321 to Assembly Bill 339.
Assemblyman Yeager's moved. Assembly adopt Amendment 321 to Assembly Bill 339. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment allows the victim to be heard prior to assigning the defendant to a program of treatment. It provides that upon fulfillment of the terms and conditions, the court may conditionally dismiss the proceedings. And finally, it provides that the records will not be sealed until 7 years after the conditional dismissal.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 321 to Assembly Bill 339, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered, general file.
Assembly Bill 340, introduced by Assemblyman Matthews, an act relating to administrative regulations requiring agencies to determine the economic impact of proposed regulations, prohibiting agencies from adopting certain regulations that will have an economic impact without legislative and executive approval, and providing the most appropriately thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 4, end of Section 4, end of bill.
On the amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
Amendment 361, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 361 to Assembly Bill 340.
Assemblyman Flores moved. The Assembly adopt Amendment 361. Assembly Bill 340. Remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment removes the existing language and instead requires the Legislative Commission to appoint a committee to study the number of regulations that would be captured under the original provisions of the bill and the cost to conduct and economic impact of those regulations.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 361. Assembly Bill 340 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered, general file.
Assembly Bill 340 hearing, introduced by Assemblywoman Thomas, an act relating to public health, providing for walking audits of census tracts within urbanized areas and providing other measures appropriately thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 2, end of Section 2, end of bill.
On the amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
I have Amendment 465, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Health and Human Services.
Assemblywoman Wynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt Amendment 465 to Assembly Bill 343.
Assemblywoman Wynn moves. Assembly adopt Amendment 465. Assembly Bill 343. Remarks.
The amendment removes the provisions of the introduced bill and provides instead that the regional transportation commissions of certain counties must develop a plan for conducting walking audits of urbanized areas and submit this plan to the respective health districts and legislative committee on healthcare no later than June 1st, 2022. It also removes the unfunded mandate provisions in the bill.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 465. Assembly Bill 343 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
No, there are
Bills
none.
ordered, general file.
Assembly Bill 345, introduced by Assemblyman Ron Liker, an act relating to substance use disorders, authorizing the establishment of a program for the prevention of overdoses and disease under certain circumstances, requiring the operator of such a program to report certain information to the Health Authority, the Board of County Commissioners, and the State Board of Health, providing for the confidentiality of certain information concerning such a program, exempting operators, employees, volunteers, and participants of such a program from certain penalties, prohibiting a practitioner other than a veterinarian from prescribing an opioid to treat certain patients unless the prescription is medically necessary, requiring such a practitioner to prescribe an opioid antagonist along with an opioid in certain circumstances and providing other measures appropriately thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 13, end of Section 13, end of bill.
On the amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
I have Amendment 344, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Health and Human Services.
Assemblywoman Wynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt Amendment 344 to Assembly Bill 345.
Assemblywoman Wynn moves. Assembly adopt Amendment 344 to Assembly Bill 345. Remarks.
The amendment deletes all the existing provisions of AB 345 and instead provides that the definition of the term drug paraphernalia does not include any type of fentanyl testing strip.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 344 to Assembly Bill 345 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendment adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered, general file.
Assembly Bill 348, introduced by Assemblywoman Carlton, an act relating to healthcare, establishing and prescribing the duties of the Patient Protection Commission Advisory Committee, transferring the Patient Protection Commission from the Office of the Governor to the Office of the Director of the Department of Health and Human Services, revising the membership and duties of the Commission, requiring the Commission to establish an all-payer claims database containing information relating to health insurance claims for benefits provided in the state, requiring certain insurers to submit data to the database, authorizing certain additional insurers to submit data to the database, providing for the release of data in the database under certain circumstances, requiring the Commission to compile certain reports relating to the database, providing immunity from civil and criminal liability for certain persons and entities, authorizing the imposition of administrative penalties for violations of certain requirements concerning the database, requiring the Commission to coordinate and administer certain assistance and providing other measures appropriately thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 29, end of Section 29, end of bill.
On the amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
I have Amendment 210, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Health and Human Services.
Assemblywoman Wynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt Amendment 210 to Assembly Bill 348.
Assemblywoman Wynn moves. Assembly adopt Amendment 210 to Assembly Bill 348. Remarks.
Yes, this amendment removes any provisions related to the establishment of the Patient Protection Commission Advisory Committee and an all-payer claims database. It also restores the existing duties of the Patient Protection Commission that are deleted in the introduced version and further revises the membership composition of the commission.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 210 to Assembly Bill 348 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 356, introduced by the Committee on Ways and Means and Act relating to water, creating and setting forth the requirements for the program for the conservation of water, creating the account for purchasing and retiring water rights, authorizing the state engineer to purchase and retire certain water rights with money from the account, and providing other means appropriately thereto. The people's state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 36, end of Section 36, end of bill.
On the amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
Amendment 342, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Natural Resources.
Assemblyman Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 342 to Assembly Bill 356.
Assemblyman Watts move the Assembly adopt Amendment 342 to Assembly Bill 356. Remarks?
Thank you. The amendment deletes the provisions of the original bill creating a program for the conservation of water and the account for purchasing and retiring water rights, and instead requires the Legislative Committee on Public Lands to conduct a study concerning water conservation, prohibits with certain exceptions the use of water from the Colorado River to irrigate non-functional turf on certain property, and requires the Board of Directors of the Southern Nevada Water Authority to develop a plan for the removal of non-functional turf.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 342 to Assembly Bill 356, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 374, introduced by Assemblyman Tolles et al., Senators Severs, Gansert et al., and are relating to substance use disorders, creating the Substance Use Disorder Working Group and the Opioid Abatement Fund, requiring the working group to allocate the proceeds of certain litigation between the fund and certain local governments, requiring the working group to award grants and financial support to the fund from the fund to support programs, procedures, and strategies for certain state and local governmental entities for treating, preventing, and reducing opioid use disorder and misuse of opioids, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people's state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 14, end of Section 14, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 211, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Health and Human Services.
Assemblywoman Wynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt Amendment 211 to Assembly Bill 374.
Assemblywoman Wynn has moved the Assembly adopt Amendment 211 to Assembly Bill 374. Remarks?
Yes, this amendment creates a statewide substance abuse use response working group within the Office of the Attorney General. It also requires the Department of Health and Human Service to annually report to the working group the use of state and local funds to address substance misuse and substance use disorders, and requires the working group to study, evaluate, and make recommendations concerning the use of these funds.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 211 to Assembly Bill 374, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 400, introduced by the Committee on Judiciary and Act relating to public safety, revising provisions relating to prohibited acts concerning the use of marijuana in the operation of a vehicle or vessel, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people's state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 18, end of Section 18, end of bill.
And amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
There are none. Or excuse me. I have Amendment 324, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Judiciary.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 324 to Assembly Bill 400.
Assemblyman Yeager has moved the Assembly adopt Amendment 324 to Assembly Bill 400. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment deletes Section 4 and 9 of the bill and also decouples the driving under the influence statute with the workers' compensation statutes.
And further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 324 to Assembly Bill 400, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 405, introduced by the Committee on Judiciary and Act relating to gaming and creating the legislative declaration regarding the use of digital and electronic signatures in the gaming industry, codifying and revising certain provisions of the regulations of the Nevada Gaming Commission, revising provisions relating to the filing of certain reports with the Nevada Gaming Control Board, revising the definition of global risk management, prohibiting certain acts relating to gaming, providing penalty, and providing other measures properly in thereto. The people's state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 7, end of Section 7, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 325, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Judiciary.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 325 to Assembly Bill 405.
Assemblyman Yeager has moved the Assembly adopt Amendment 325 to Assembly Bill 405. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment deletes Section 1 through 4 and 7 of the bill and also adds the word coach in Section 5.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 325 to Assembly Bill 405, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 418, introduced by the Committee on Education and Act related to education, requiring the Department of Education to develop, implement, and analyze an exit survey for certain employees who leave employment at the A school district, authorizing the department to partner with certain persons or entities to develop, implement, and analyze the results of such exit surveys, requiring the Board of Trustees of a school district to administer and report to the department the results of an exit survey, requiring the department to make certain recommendations to the Board of Trustees of a Bill School District requiring the department to report certain information to the legislature or the Legislative Committee on Education and providing other matters properly laid thereto. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 2, end of Section 2, end of bill.
Any members of Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 304 proposed by the Assembly Committee on Education.
Assemblywoman Bill Axelrod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 304 to Assembly Bill 418.
Assemblywoman Bill Axelrod moved. Assembly adopt Amendment 304 to Assembly Bill 418. Remarks?
Amendment 304 clarifies requirements for the Department of Education on doing all the things for the exit survey.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 304 to Assembly Bill 418, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The members adopt. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill's ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 436, introduced by the Committee on Commerce and Labor, an act relating to health care, prohibiting an insurer from entering into a contract with a provider of vision care that contains certain provisions requiring an insurer to provide certain information to a provider of vision care before entering into a contract to include the provider and the network of the insurer, prescribing certain requirements concerning the advertising and marketing of vision coverage, authorizing the imposition of an administrative penalty, limiting the rates that a provider of vision care may charge to patients for vision care provided out of network, and providing other matters properly laid thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 14, end of Section 14, end of bill.
Any members of Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 374 proposed by the Assembly Committee on Commerce and Labor.
Assemblywoman Howdy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 374 to Assembly Bill 436.
Assemblywoman Howdy gets moved. Assembly adopt Amendment 374 to Assembly Bill 436. Remarks?
The amendment prohibits an insurer that does not provide reimbursement for specific vision care from claiming that the insurer covers vision or that such vision care is available at a discount. It also deletes Section 1A, 1B, 1C, 1E, deletes subsection 5 of Section 1, deletes Section 10, 11, and 12 of the bill, and redefines vision care.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 374 to Assembly Bill 436, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The members adopt. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill's ordered general file. We'll now go to order business 4, reports to standing committee.
Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Commerce and Labor, to which will refer to Assembly Bills 45, 278, 382, 387, has had the Senator consideration of exit to report the same back the recommendation and due pass amended, and your Committee on Commerce and Labor, to which will refer to Assembly Bills 47, 222, has had the Senator consideration of exit to report the same back the recommendation and due pass amended, and your Committee on Commerce and Labor, to which was referred to Assembly Bill 61, has had the Senator consideration of exit to report the same back the recommendation and due pass amended, and your Committee on Commerce and Labor, to which was referred to Assembly Bill 180, has had the Senator consideration of exit to report the same back the recommendation and to pass amended, and your Committee on Commerce and Labor, to which will refer to Assembly Bills 277, 298, 327, 391, 442, has had the Senator consideration of exit to report the same back the recommendation and to pass amended, and your Committee on Commerce and Labor, to which was referred to Assembly Bill 359, has had the Senator consideration of exit to report the same back the recommendation and to pass amended. Senator Haddocky, Chair. Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Education, to which will refer to Assembly Bills 38 through 235, 367, 371, 416, has had the Senator consideration of exit to report the same back the recommendation and to pass amended, and your Committee on Education, to which will refer to Assembly Bills 169, 195, 417, has had the Senator consideration of exit to report the same back the recommendation and to pass amended, and your Committee on Education, to which was referred to Assembly Bill 194, has had the Senator consideration of exit to report the same back the recommendation and to pass amended, and your Committee on Education, to which will refer to Assembly Bills 213, 254, 262, has had the Senator consideration of exit to report the same back the recommendation and then to pass amended, and your Committee on Education, to which was referred to Assembly Bill 225, has had the Senator consideration of exit to report the same back the recommendation and to pass amended, and your Committee on Education, to which was referred to Assembly Bill 231, has had the Senator consideration of exit to report the same back the recommendation and to pass amended, and your Committee on Education, to which were referred Assembly Bills 257, 266, has had the Senator consideration of exit to report the same back the recommendation and to pass amended, and your Committee on Education, to which was referred Assembly Bill 384, has had the Senator consideration of exit to report the same back the recommendation and to pass amended, and your Committee on Education, to which were referred Assembly Bills 419, 420, has had the Senator consideration of exit to report the same back the recommendation and to pass amended. Shannon Bill Axelrod, Chair. Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Government Affairs, to which were referred Assembly Bills 3139, 245, 313, 335, 376, 385, 397, 408, 445 has set the same under consideration and begs leave to put the same back. The recommendation and do pass as amended. Under Committee on Government Affairs, to which will refer to Assembly Bills 55, 133, 184 has set the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation and do pass as amended. Under Committee on Government Affairs, to which was referred Assembly Bill 253 has set the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation and do pass as amended. Under Committee on Government Affairs, to which was referred Assembly Bill 378 has set the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation and do pass as amended. Under Committee on Government Affairs, to which was referred Assembly Bill 410 has set the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation amended and do pass as amended. Edgar Flores, Chair. Mr. Speaker, Committee on Growth and Infrastructure, to which will refer to Assembly Bills 281, 444 has set the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation and do pass as amended. Under Committee on Growth and Infrastructure, to which will refer to Assembly Bills 301, 383 has set the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation and do pass as amended. Under Committee on Growth and Infrastructure, to which will refer to Assembly Bills 349, 379, 413 has set the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation and do pass as amended. Under Committee on Growth and Infrastructure, to which was referred Assembly Bill 388 has set the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation and do pass as amended. Under Committee on Growth and Infrastructure, to which was referred Assembly Bill 429 has set the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation and do pass as amended. Daniel Monroe Moreno, Chair. Mr. Speaker, Committee on Health and Human Services, to which was referred Assembly Bill 287 has set the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation and do pass as amended. Under Committee on Health and Human Services, to which was referred Assembly Bill 347 has set the same under consideration, begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation and do pass as amended. Rochelle Tubman, Chair. Mr. Speaker, Committee on Judiciary, to which will refer to Assembly Bills 116, 158, 243, 251, 341, 427 has set the same under consideration, begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation and do pass as amended. Under Committee on Judiciary, to which will refer to Assembly Bills 424, 440 has set the same under consideration, begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation and do pass as amended. Steve Yeager, Chair. Mr. Speaker, Committee on Natural Resources, to which was referred Assembly Bill 146 has set the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation and do pass amended. Under Committee on Natural Resources, to which was referred Assembly Bill 399 has set the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation and do pass amended. Howard Watts, Chair. Mr. Speaker, Committee on Revenue, to which will refer to Assembly Bills 2966 has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation and do pass amended. Under Committee on Revenue, to which was re-referred Assembly Bill 90 has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation and do pass amended. Under Committee on Revenue, to which was referred Assembly Bill 322 has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation and do pass amended. Under Committee on Revenue, to which was referred Assembly Bill 360 has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation and do pass amended. Under Committee on Revenue, to which was referred Assembly Bill 368 has had the same under consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation and do pass amended. Leslie E. Cohen, Chair.
We go to Order Business 8, motions, resolutions, and notices.
Notice of exemption, April 19, 2021. The Fiscal Analysis Division pursuant to Joint Standing Rule 14.6 has determined the eligibility of exemption of Assembly Bill 61 and 90. And the Fiscal Analysis Division pursuant to Joint Standing Rule 14.6 has determined the eligibility for exemption of Assembly Bill 416. Sir Copeland, Fiscal Analysis Division.
Can we go back to Order Business 11? Or do we have ways? Someone, Benitez Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Under Order Business 8.
Order Business 8.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that Assembly Bill 86 and Assembly Bill 118 be taken from the Chief Clerk's desk and be placed onto general file.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. So now back to 11. Order Business 11.
Assembly Bill 3, introduced by the Committee on Government Affairs and Activating Land Use Planning, revising provisions concerning electronic transmission of certain maps and other documents relating to approval of divisions of land and providing other measures relating thereto. The people stated that represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 3, end of Section 3, end of bill.
Any members of Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
Amendment 188, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 188 to Assembly Bill 3.
Assemblyman Flores moved. Assembly adopt Amendment 188, Assembly Bill 3. Marks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment does the following: requires the submission of electronic documents must comply with existing statutes, regulations, standards set by the county recorder, and clarifies that the governing bodies are prohibited from establishing requirements and procedures related to electronic document formatting, encryption, signatures, and other matters.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 188, Assembly Bill 3, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendment adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 29, introduced by the Committee on Revenue and Equitable Economic Development, redesignating the knowledge account as the Nevada Innovation Account, requiring the Executive Director of the Office of Economic Development to establish a competitive grant program to facilitate research and development of technology and address market gaps in the development of technology in the state, revising provisions governing commercialization revenue allocated between the Office of the Research Universities and the Desert Research Institute, revising the duties of the Executive Director, expanding the services that must be provided by Technology Outreach Program, and providing an most properly thereto. The people's state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 8, end of Section 8, and a bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bills of whole?
Amendment 256, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Revenue.
Assemblywoman Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment Number 256 to Assembly Bill 29.
Assemblywoman Cohen has moved. Assembly adopt Amendment 256 to Assembly Bill 29. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment specifies the grant program are designated to facilitate technology outreach programs, and not less than 80% of grants must be awarded to the research universities, Desert Research Institute, or either with private entities.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 256 to Assembly Bill 29, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendment adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 38, introduced by the Committee on Education and Equitable Education, revising requirements governing input from interested persons concerning a program of career and technical education, exempting an advisory technical skills committee for such a program from certain requirements governing the meetings of a public body, revising requirements relating to work-based learning programs, and providing other means properly thereto. The people's state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 5, end of Section 5, and a bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bills of whole?
I have Amendment 477, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Education.
Assemblywoman Bill Axelrod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 477 to Assembly Bill 38.
Assemblywoman Bill Axelrod moved. Assembly adopt Amendment 477 to Assembly Bill 38. Remarks?
Amendment 477 requires that the information for the report on the number of pupils participating in the work-based learning program be desegregated by race, ethnicity, gender, and special population.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 477 to Assembly Bill 38, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 45, introduced by the Committee on Commerce and Labor, an act relating to insurance, providing for the termination under certain circumstances of various licenses, permits, certificates of registration, certificates of authority, and other authorizations to engage in an activity relating to insurance, revising provisions relating to bonds filed by various persons regulated by the Commissioner of Insurance, revising provisions governing service of process on certain insurers, revising provisions governing the issuance, renewal, and expiration of various licenses, permits, certificates of registration, and other authorizations to engage in an activity relating to insurance, revising provisions relating to fees paid by various persons regulated by the Commissioner, setting forth requirements relating to certain policies of stop-loss insurance, revising provisions governing coverage for maternity care and pediatric care, revising provisions governing misleading advertisements by certain persons regulated by the Commissioner, revising provisions governing annual disclosures by certain persons regulated by the Commissioner, revising requirements relating to captive insurers and risk retention groups, revising requirements relating to investments for various persons regulated by the Commissioner, revising requirements relating to examinations and investigations of various persons regulated by the Commissioner, providing peace officer status to certain employees of the Division of Insurance of the Department of Business and Industry, to enforce statutes and regulations governing issuance and insurance, and investigate violations of such statutes or regulations, revising provisions governing the applicability of laws to various persons regulated by the Commissioner, transferring duties for the licensing and regulation of employee leasing companies from the administrator of the Division of Industrial Relations to the Department to the Commissioner, and providing other means properly thereto. The people's state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 82, 83, 87, end of Section 87, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bills of whole?
There are none.
Bills ordered to general fund.
Assembly Bill 47, introduced by the Committee on Commerce and Labor, and outlined unfair trade practices requiring certain notice be provided to the Attorney General before the consummation of certain mergers and acquisitions, making it unlawful to enter into certain agreements which restrain a natural person from engaging in a lawful profession, trade, or business, providing that certain provisions in certain agreements or policies related to healthcare are void and unenforceable unless approved by the Attorney General, prescribing procedures and criteria for obtaining such approval, revising provisions relating to proceedings instituted by the Attorney General under the Nevada Unfair Trade Practice Act, providing penalties, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1. Section 25, end of Section 25, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
Amendment 239, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Commerce and Labor.
Assemblywoman Howdy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 239 to Assembly Bill 47.
Assemblywoman Howdy moves to adopt Amendment 239, Assembly Bill 47. Remarks?
The amendment imposes certain notification requirements and revises provisions relating to proceedings instituted by the Attorney General under the Nevada Unfair Trade Practice.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 239, Assembly Bill 47, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill is ordered to general fund.
Assembly Bill 55, introduced by the Committee on Government Affairs, and outlined the City of North Las Vegas, making certain grammatical and clarifying changes to the Charter of the City of North Las Vegas, revising provisions relating to special and emergency meetings of the City Council, revising the procedure for enacting city ordinances, making various changes to the duties of the City Clerk, revising the powers of the City Council relating to animals, revising provisions relating to the removal of City Attorney, authorizing the City Manager and City Attorney to take certain legal action for the collection and disposition of certain money, authorizing the City Council to appoint one or more hearing commissioners and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 22, end of Section 22, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
Amendment 347, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 347 to Assembly Bill 55.
Assemblyman Flores moved. Assembly adopt Amendment 347, Assembly Bill 55. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Amongst other things, it deletes existing language regarding the regulation of any practice tending to annoy persons passing in public places, deletes existing language regarding riots, deletes Section 13 regarding hearing commissioners, and creates a charter committee.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 347, Assembly Bill 55, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendment adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill is ordered to general fund.
Assembly Bill 61, introduced by the Committee on Commerce and Labor, and outlined trade practices, increasing penalties for certain offenses relating to the use of a device for automatic dialing and announcing, establishing certain practices as deceptive trade practices, authorizing the court to impose additional civil penalties for certain deceptive trade practices under certain circumstances, revising provisions relating to the initiation of certain administrative hearings, revising the penalties for willfully and knowingly engaging in a deceptive trade practice, eliminating the statute of limitations for certain civil actions and criminal prosecutions involving deceptive trade practices, authorizing the Consumer's Advocate at the Bureau of Consumer Protection in the Office of the Attorney General to have access to certain records, providing penalties and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 35, end of Section 35, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 240, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Commerce and Labor.
Assemblywoman Howdy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 240 to Assembly Bill 61.
Assemblywoman Howdy moves. Assembly adopt Amendment 240, Assembly Bill 61. Remarks?
The amendment revises provisions relating to robocalling, price gouging prohibition during times of emergency and declared disasters, deceptive trade practices, and credit service organizations.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 240, Assembly Bill 61, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill is ordered to general fund.
Assembly Bill 66, introduced by the Committee on Revenue, and outlined taxation revising requirements for agreements between the Office of Economic Development and applicants for an abatement or partial abatement of certain taxes and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 13, end of Section 13, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
Amendment
sorry.
394, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Revenue.
Sorry about that. Assemblywoman Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment Number 394 to Assembly Bill 66.
Assemblywoman Cohen has moved. Assembly adopt Amendment 394 to Assembly Bill 66. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment adds provisions including requiring the Department of Taxation to issue a document certifying an abatement or partial abatement of sales and use taxes to a business that has been approved for these abatements by the Office of Economic Development.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 394 to Assembly Bill 66, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 90, introduced by Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson, enacting local governments requiring counties to determine whether projects are projects of inter-county significance, requiring counties to pay impact fees to certain local governments for certain costs incurred as a result of projects of inter-county significance, and providing the most appropriate thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 15, end of Section 15, end of bill.
On amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
Amendment 257, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Revenue.
Assemblywoman Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment Number 257 to Assembly Bill 90.
Assemblywoman Cohen's moved that the Assembly adopt Amendment 257 to Assembly Bill 90. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment deletes the bill as introduced and requires the Legislative Commission to appoint a committee to conduct an interim study concerning the impacts of projects of inter-county significance that are initiated in response to state-approved economic development incentives.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 257 to Assembly Bill 90, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 116, introduced by Assemblyman Nguyen et al., Senators Canizaro et al., enacting the vehicles, establishing civil penalties for certain traffic and related violations, defining certain traffic and vehicle violations as misdemeanors, creating procedures for civil infractions for traffic and related violations to be adjudicated, and providing other matters properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 81, end of Section 81, end of bill.
On amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
I do not have any amendments.
I don't believe there is no amendment. The bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 133, introduced by Assemblyman Flores et al., enacting peace officers, requiring a law enforcement agency to provide training to peace officers in approaching and interacting with a person who is openly carrying a firearm, requiring all uniformed peace officers to wear a portable event recording device while interacting with the public on duty, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 5, end of Section 5, end of bill.
On amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
I have Amendment 291, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 291 to Assembly Bill 133.
Assemblyman Flores moved the Assembly adopt Amendment 291, Assembly Bill 133. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment deletes sections 1 and 2 through 4 of the bill, requires 6 hours of annual firearms training, increases the hours required for annual professional development and training, and requires a minimum number of hours of in-person training.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 291, Assembly Bill 133, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 139, introduced by Assemblyman Yeager et al., Senator Scheibel, enacting to local governments, authorizing the governing body of a county or city to transfer money from certain enterprise funds to pay the cost for constructing a fire station, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 5, end of Section 5, end of bill.
On amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
I have Amendment 336, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 336 to Assembly Bill 139.
Assemblyman Flores moved the Assembly adopt Amendment 336, Assembly Bill 139. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment clarifies that the fees transferred from an enterprise fund may be used for the capital cost of construction of one fire station, and requires the Committee on Local Government Finance to review and report on the local fees collected by the enterprise fund to be determined whether the fees are excessive.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 336, Assembly Bill 139, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 146, introduced by Assemblywoman Peters, enacting water, requiring the State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources to establish a program regulating water pollution resulting from diffuse sources, establishing requirements for applicants for certain permits relating to water pollution to post a bond or other surety, revising requirements for regulations adopted by the State Environmental Commission relating to water pollution, revising notice requirements relating to regulations adopted by the Commission, revising various provisions relating to the control of water pollution by the Director of the Department, revising requirements relating to the control of diffuse sources of water pollution, revising various requirements for permits to discharge a pollutant or inject fluids through a well, requiring the Director to consult or notify Indian tribes of certain actions relating to water pollution, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 24, end of Section 24, end of bill.
On amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
Amendment 338, proposed by the Committee on Natural Resources.
Assemblyman Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 338 to Assembly Bill 146.
Assemblyman Watson moved. Assembly adopt Amendment 338 to Assembly Bill 146. Remarks?
Thank you. The amendment removes the requirement to establish a program regulating water pollution from diffuse sources and instead authorizes the State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources to develop plans, recommendations, and policies to address water pollution from these sources.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 338 to Assembly Bill 146, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered to general fund.
Assembly Bill 158, introduced by Assemblyman Monroe Moreno et al., Senators Harrison Brooks, and equivalent to crimes, revising the penalties for certain offenses involving alcohol or cannabis and providing other measures properly in thereto. The people's state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 5, end of Section 5, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Bills ordered to general fund.
Assembly Bill 169, introduced by Assemblyman Considine et al., and equivalent to higher education, requiring certain institutions of higher education to have a policy for refunds that requires the institution to refund a student all the money the student has paid if the institution impairs the ability of the student to complete a training program agreed upon in an enrollment agreement, and providing the measures properly in thereto. The people's state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 2, end of Section 2, end of bill.
On amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a
I
whole.
have Amendment 96, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Education.
Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt Amendment 96 to Assembly Bill 169.
Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod has moved that the Assembly adopt Amendment 96 to Assembly Bill 169. Remarks?
Amendment 96 revises that a post-secondary institution can perform recruiting activities. It adds additional requirements for private post-secondary institutions and changes the effective date.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 96 to Assembly Bill 169, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered to general fund.
Assembly Bill 180, introduced by Assemblywoman Hanson, an act relating to insurance requiring the adoption of regulations to require insurers offering policies of insurance which provide for the payment of expenses which are not covered by Medicare to offer at least one such policy to provide coverage to certain persons with a disability and providing other measures properly in thereto. The people's state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 2, end of Section 2, end of bill.
On the amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a
I
whole.
have Amendment 368, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Commerce and Labor.
Assemblywoman Howdy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 368 to Assembly Bill 180.
Assemblyman Howdy has moved the Assembly adopt Amendment 368 to Assembly Bill 180. Remarks?
Adds a definition of policy to supplement Medicare as provided for in the Nevada Administrative Code. It also adds by reason of disability as defined by USC Section 426 and requires each insurer offering a policy to supplement Medicare to offer Medicare guarantee issue plans to provide coverage for people who are less than 65 years of age and qualify for Medicare because of a disability.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 368 to Assembly Bill 180, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered to general fund.
Assembly Bill 184, introduced by Assemblyman Frierson and Benitez Thompson, an act relating to small businesses, creating the Office of Small Business Advocacy within the Office of Lieutenant Governor, setting forth the powers and duties of the Office of Small Business Advocacy, authorizing the Office of Small Business Advocacy to accept gifts, grants, and contributions, providing that the records of the Office of Small Business Advocacy are confidential, and providing other measures properly in thereto. The people's state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 20, end of Section 20, end of bill.
On the amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
I have Amendment 61, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 61 to Assembly Bill 184.
Assemblyman Flores has moved the Assembly adopt Amendment 61 of Assembly Bill 184. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment authorizes the office to establish and maintain an education course for small businesses, creates the account for small business advocacy in the State General Fund, authorizes the Lieutenant Governor to employ any necessary personnel within the limits of money available other than from the State General Fund, and allows the bill to expire by limitation on June 30th, 2023.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 61 of Assembly Bill 184, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered to general fund.
Assembly Bill 194, introduced by Assemblyman Torres et al., Senator Doniati, an act relating to education requiring the annual report of accountability to include certain information relating to restorative justice, revising provisions relating to the suspension or expulsion of pupils, requiring the Office for a Safe and Respectful Learning Environment to provide certain guidance to the Board of Trustees of a school district, requiring the Department of Education in consultation with the Office to adopt regulations relating to the discipline of pupils, exempting certain hearings relating to appeals of the suspension or expulsion of pupils from the provisions governing public meetings and providing other measures properly named thereto. The people of the state of Nevada represented in the Senate and Assembly to enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 13, end of Section 13, end of bill.
Any members to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 117, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Education.
Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopts Amendment 117 to Assembly Bill 194.
Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod moves the Assembly adopt Amendment 117 to Assembly Bill 194. Remarks?
Amendment 117 deletes the timeline in some paragraphs and establishes a new timeline for the NDE. It deletes subsection 1 through 3 of Section 6, authorizes designee of Board of Trustees or the school district or governing body of a charter school or university school to take the required actions of the bill, and deletes the Office of Safe and Respectful Learning Environment.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 117 to Assembly Bill 194 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill is ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 195, introduced by Assemblyman Torres et al., Senators Dennis and John Yade, and relating to education, requiring the Board of Trustees of the school district to collect certain data relating to pupils who are English learners, establishing certain rights for pupils who are English learners and the parents of or legal guardians of pupils who are English learners, requiring the Board of Trustees of each school district and the Department of Education to submit certain reports, authorizing the department to adopt certain regulations, requiring the Board of Trustees of each school district to identify the primary language of each pupil, requiring a pupil who is an English learner to remain in a program for English learners until the pupil passes an appropriate assessment, and providing the most properly named thereto. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 9, end of Section 9, end of bill.
Any members to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 198, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Education.
Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt Amendment 198 to Assembly Bill 195.
Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod moves the Assembly adopt Amendment 198 to Assembly Bill 195. Remarks?
Amendment 198 revises provisions in Section 2. It requires the Board of Trustees in each school district to provide information to the parent or guardian of an English language learner in language that a format that they can understand. It provides that a parent or guardian's right to have their child receive services for English learners throughout the bill, and requires Nevada Department of Education to translate and the Board of Trustees to post enumerated rights in the 5 most common language on the internet websites. It also revises Section 4.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopted Amendment 198 to Assembly Bill 195 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill is ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 213, introduced by Assemblyman Flores et al., an act relating to education prohibiting the Board of Regents of the University of Nevada from fixing a tuition charge against certain students, providing that a student does not have to certify his or her citizenship or immigration status to complete the free application for federal student aid to receive certain scholarships or grants, prohibiting certain college tuition and savings programs from excluding persons based solely on the citizenship or immigration status of the person or his or her family, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 8, end of Section 8, end of bill.
Any members to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
Amendment 199, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Education.
Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I moved the Assembly adopt Amendment 199 to Assembly Bill 213.
Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod moves the Assembly adopt Amendment 199 to Assembly Bill 213. Remarks?
Amendment 119 replaces enrolled with is admitted to in some section. It authorizes Board of Regents to use up to 5% of the money received from direct legislative appropriations from the State General Fund to administer the state Silver State Opportunity Grant, and revises the effective date in some section.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 199 to Assembly Bill 213 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill is ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 222, introduced by Assemblywoman Torres, an act relating to employment, making it unlawful employment practice for an employer to take certain actions against an employee who reports or requests the correction of or refuses to engage in certain conduct, establishing procedures for certain civil actions concerning unlawful employment practices, revising provisions governing periods of limitation in certain civil actions concerning unlawful employment practices, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 5, end of Section 5, end of bill.
Any members to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 369, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Commerce and Labor.
Assemblywoman Howdy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 369 to Assembly Bill 222.
Assemblywoman Howdy gets moved. Assembly adopt Amendment 369, Assembly Bill 222. Remarks?
The amendment extends whistleblower protection and deletes Section 3 of the bill.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 369 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill is ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 225, introduced by Assemblyman Toles et al., Senators Lang et al., an act relating to education requiring the provision of accommodations on examinations to certain applicants for an initial license as a teacher or other educational personnel and providing other means relating thereto. The people's state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 2, end of Section 2, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
Amendment 200, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Education.
Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 200 to Assembly Bill 225.
Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod moved that the Assembly adopt Amendment 200 to Assembly Bill 225. Remarks?
Amendment 200 deletes new language in certain sections and includes alternative means rather than exceptions to examinations and adds a co-sponsor.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 200, Assembly Bill 225, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill's ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 231, introduced by Assemblywoman Cohen and Krauser, an act relating to education establishing the account for instruction on the Holocaust and other genocides in the State General Fund, authorizing the Council to establish academic standards for public schools to establish standards of content and performance for instruction on the Holocaust and other genocides, imposing certain additional duties on the Governor's Advisory Council on Education relating to the Holocaust, requiring the State Board of Education to appoint a subcommittee to conduct an interim study on providing curriculum on the Holocaust and other genocides and providing other measures relating thereto. The people's state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 7, end of Section 7, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
There are none.
There are none? Bill's ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 235, introduced by Assemblywoman Brittany Miller, an act relating to education requiring the Board of Trustees of a school district and the governing bodies of charter and private schools to provide support and assistance to certain pupils and their parents and guardians in completing the free application for federal student aid, requiring the Board of Trustees of a school district and the governing bodies of certain charter and private schools to report certain information to the state treasurer and providing other measures properly thereto. The people's state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 4, end of Section 4, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
Amendment
Bill's
301,
ordered. Sorry. Jumped the gun.
proposed by the Assembly Committee on Education.
Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 301 to Assembly Bill 235.
Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod moved the Assembly to adopt Amendment 301 to Assembly Bill 235. Remarks?
Amendment 301 adds information that must be shared with the Nevada College Kickstart program. It provides for the inclusion of information on financial aid. It specifies high school as appropriate through the bill and provides additional clarifying language.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 301 to Assembly Bill 235, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopting further amendments to the bill.
There are none.
Those ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 243, introduced by Assemblyman Orange Liquor et al. An act relating to administration of justice, creating the Nevada Police Reform Advisory Task Force and prescribing its membership and duties, revising certain provisions relating to the sentences of offenders who are less than 21 years of age, requiring each prosecutorial office to establish a system of race-blind charging to be used when determining whether criminal charges should be filed against a person, requiring each district attorney to establish a system of race-blind charging to be used when determining whether a petition alleging delinquency of a child should be filed, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people's state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 13, end of Section 13, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Bill's ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 245, introduced by Assemblyman Flores, enacting public affairs, increasing certain fees which may be charged by a notary public, increasing certain fees required to register or renew a registration to engage in the business of a document preparation service, and providing other measures appropriate thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 4, end of Section 4, end of bill.
Are the members of Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
Amendment 328, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 328 to Assembly Bill 245.
Assemblyman Flores moves the Assembly to adopt Amendment 328 to Assembly Bill 245. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment increases the fee for a notary public to travel during certain hours, requires that certain fees collected by the Secretary of State may only be used to administer and enforce the document preparation service program, authorizes that the Secretary of State to impose a civil penalty on unregistered individuals engaged in document preparation services, and adds certain sponsors.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 328, Assembly Bill 245, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill is ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 251, introduced by Assemblyman Kreisner, Senators Hardy et al., an act relating to juvenile justice requiring a peace officer or probation officer to ensure that a child in custody consults with a parent or guardian or an attorney before the commencement of a custodial interrogation of a child, establishing provisions relating to the destruction of certain records relating to children, repealing and revising certain provisions concerning the sealing of certain records relating to children, and providing other measures for relating thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 9, end of Section 9, end of bill.
Are the members of Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 319, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Judiciary.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 319 to Assembly Bill 251.
Assemblyman Yeager's moved. Assembly adopt Amendment 319 to Assembly Bill 251. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment provides that at the age of 18, a person may petition the court for the expungement of his or her juvenile record for misdemeanors or acts of a child in need of supervision.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 319 to Assembly Bill 251, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill is ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 253, introduced by Assemblywoman Considine, an act relating to governmental administration revising provisions relating to when a subcommittee or working group of a public body is subject to the open meeting law, setting forth certain requirements for meetings of public bodies that use remote technology systems, revising the notice requirements for a meeting of a public body, revising provisions relating to the privilege of certain persons to publish defamatory matter at a public meeting, revising requirements for notice of intent to act upon a regulation, and providing other measures properly relating thereto. The people stated that are represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 6, end of Section 6, end of bill.
Are the members of Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 287, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 287 to Assembly Bill 253.
Assemblyman Flores has moved that the Assembly adopt Amendment 287 to Assembly Bill 253. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And my apologies, Mr. Speaker. I am doing this on the fly. The amendment, amongst other things, adds the terms additionally, sections 2 and 3 require that if a public body holds a meeting using remote technology system and does not have a physical location for the meeting, that the public body is required to have an internet website and post on its internet website the notice of the meeting and any supporting material for the material.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 287 to Assembly Bill 253, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill is ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 254, introduced by Assemblyman Patterson et al., an act relating to education prohibiting certain entities from compensating a student athlete for the use of the name, image, or likeness of the student athlete, providing that a student athlete may be compensated for the use of the name, image, or likeness of the student athlete by certain organizations, directing the Legislative Committee on Education to appoint a committee to conduct an interim study relating to the use of the name, image, or likeness of a student athlete, and providing other matters properly relating thereto. The people of the state of Nevada are now represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 9, end of Section 9, end of bill.
Any members of Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 201, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Education.
Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 201 to Assembly Bill 254.
Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod moves the Assembly adopt Amendment 201 to Assembly Bill 254. Remarks?
Amendment 201, authorizing an institution to adopt a policy imposing reasonable restrictions on a student athlete entering into a contract. It authorized the institution to require a student athlete to receive education to prepare them into contracts, and requires a student athlete to disclose any previous or existing contracts that compensate them, and it changes the bill effective date.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 201, Assembly Bill 254, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 257, introduced by Assemblywoman Martinez, an act relating to school property requiring the Office of Energy within the Office of the Governor to award a grant to the Board of Trustees of a school district, the sponsor of a charter school or a business, to assess and improve certain ventilation and filtration systems of a school to the extent that money is available, establishing requirements for such assessments and improvements, requiring a certified technician to complete an assessment report, requiring the Board of Trustees of a school district, the sponsor of a charter school or a business, to prepare a report, providing that a generally accepted industry standards prevails over any requirement of this bill that conflicts with the industry standard, and providing of the most properly thereto, the people's state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 14, end of Section 14, end of bill.
On the amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
I have Amendment 346, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Education.
Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 346 to Assembly Bill 257.
Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod has moved the Assembly to adopt Amendment 346 to Assembly Bill 257. Remarks?
Amendment 346 adds 3 new sections that declares legislative intent, provides and relates to school with no or limited existing mechanical ventilation in Section 10, requires related safe to in-person instruction plans. It removes subsection 6, and it adds an expiration date of June 30th, 2023.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 346 to Assembly Bill 257, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 262, introduced by Assemblyman Anderson et al., Senators Brooks and Lane, an act relating to education prohibiting the Board of Regents of the University of Nevada from assessing tuition charges against certain students and providing elements appropriate in thereto. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 2, end of Section 2, end of bill.
On the amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a
I have
whole.
Amendment 202, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Education.
Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopts Amendment 202 to Assembly Bill 262.
Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod has moved the Assembly to adopt Amendment 202 to Assembly Bill 262. Remarks?
Amendment 202 deletes the provision that prohibits the Board of Regents from charging students who graduate from high school in Nevada tuition. It revises language about students who are federally recognized Indian tribe, and adds co-sponsors, and adds a new section waiving fees.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 202 to Assembly Bill 262, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 266, introduced by Assemblywomen Brittany Miller and Anderson, an act relating to education requiring only certain personnel be counted in determining the ratio of pupils per licensed teacher, establishing provisions relating to job vacancies in a school district, requiring the Board of Trustees of a school district to post certain information on its internet website, revising provisions relating to the statewide performance evaluation system for teachers, and providing other means appropriate in thereto. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 5, end of Section 5, end of bill.
On the amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
I have Amendment 302, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Education.
Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that we adopt Amendment 302 to Assembly Bill 266.
Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod has moved the Assembly adopt Amendment 302 to Assembly Bill 266. Remarks?
Amendment 302 revises what the State Board of Education must consider when developing recommendations. It revises the Department of Ed and their evaluations, and it amends how teacher evaluations will account for teaching number of pupils that exceed the recommended ratio.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 302 to Assembly Bill 266, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 277, introduced by Assemblyman Duran et al., an act relating to insurance requiring the amount paid by an insurance company for the coverage of certain medical expenses resulting from the crash of a passenger car to be based on the usual and customary charges for the locality where the medical expenses were incurred, providing that an insured person may request that certain payments made by the insured person be deposited to a trust account maintained by an attorney for the insured person, revising provisions relating to the exchange of medical and insurance information by certain persons involved in a claim for personal injury asserted under a policy of insurance covering certain motor vehicles and providing other matters appropriately thereto. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 2, end of Section 2, end of bill.
On the amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
Amendment 370, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Commerce and Labor.
Assemblywoman Mahowdgy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 370 to Assembly Bill 277.
Assemblywoman Howdy has moved. Assembly to adopt Amendment 370 to Assembly Bill 277. Remarks?
The amendment changes usual and customary charges to actual charges incurred and deletes the requirements in Section 2 of the bill and reorganizes and revises the provisions of NRS 690B.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly to adopt Amendment 370, Assembly Bill 277, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill's ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 278, introduced by Assemblywoman Duran, enacting healthcare requiring a physician to complete a data request when renewing his or her license or registration, requiring licensing boards that license physicians to make the data request available to applicants for the renewal of a license or registration, and transmit the information obtained from the data request to the Department of Health and Human Services, and providing other matters properly in there too. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 5, end of Section 5, end of bill.
On the amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
There are none.
The bill's ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 281, introduced by Assemblyman C.H. Miller, enacting motor vehicles requiring that certain records maintained by short-term lessors be made available to the Department of Taxation, the Department of Motor Vehicles, and certain local government employees upon request, authorizing certain records maintained by short-term lessors, brokers, and dealers of vehicles to be maintained electronically, and providing other matters properly in there too. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 2, end of Section 2, end of bill.
On the amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
I have Amendment 128, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 128 to Assembly Bill 281.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno has moved. The Assembly to adopt Amendment 128 to Assembly Bill 281. Remarks?
The amendment requires electronic records to be provided within 3 days upon request instead of the 72 hours that were initially introduced in the bill.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly to adopt Amendment 128 to Assembly Bill 281, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill's ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 286, introduced by Assemblywoman Howdy, enacting crimes prohibiting a person from possessing a firearm on a covered premises under certain circumstances, prohibiting a person from engaging in certain acts relating to unfinished frames or receivers under certain circumstances, prohibiting a person from engaging in certain acts relating to firearms which are not imprinted with a serial number under certain circumstances, revising provisions relating to confiscation and disposal of dangerous weapons, providing penalties, and providing other matters properly in there too. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 10, end of Section 10, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to the Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 333, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Judiciary.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move the Assembly adopt Amendment 333 to Assembly Bill 286.
Assemblyman Yeager has moved. The Assembly to adopt Amendment 333 to Assembly Bill 286. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment revises the requirement for posting a sign warning against possessing a firearm on a covered premises.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly to adopt Amendment 333 to Assembly Bill 286, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill's ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 287, introduced by Assemblywomen Monroe Moreno, Peters, and Thomas, enacting healthcare, providing for the licensing and regulation of freestanding birthing centers, requiring a freestanding birthing center to perform certain screening and report certain information to the local health officer and make certain information available to the chief medical officer, and providing other matters properly in there too. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 37, end of Section 37, end of bill.
On the amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
Amendment 209, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Health and Human Services.
Assemblywoman Nguyen.
This is 287.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt Amendment 209 to Assembly Bill 287.
Assemblywoman Nguyen has moved. The Assembly to adopt Amendment 209 to Assembly Bill 287. Remarks?
This revises the definition of midwife and also requires any regulations adopted for the licensure of freestanding birthing centers to be aligned with certain national accreditation bodies.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly to adopt Amendment 209 to Assembly Bill 287, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Amendments adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill's ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 298, introduced by Assemblyman Flores, enacting the vehicles requiring the Commissioner of Financial Institutions to prescribe forms for use in the leasing of vehicles under certain circumstances, setting forth certain requirements for a non-commercial vehicle lease, revising the term of the definition of the term vehicle lease for certain purposes, and providing other matters properly in there too. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 10, end of Section 10, end of bill.
On the amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
Amendment 242, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Commerce and Labor.
Assemblywoman Howdy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 242 to Assembly Bill 298.
Assemblywoman Hodges moved. The Assembly adopt Amendment 242 to Assembly Bill 298. Remarks?
The amendment revises provisions concerning the enforceability of contracts for auto vehicle leases.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 242 to Assembly Bill 298, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
None.
This bill is ordered. General file.
Assembly Bill 301, introduced by Assemblyman C.H. Miller et al., an act relating motor vehicles requiring a tow operator to immediately release to the owner at no charge a vehicle that has been connected to a tow car that has been towed for certain reasons related to registration of the vehicle if the owner provides proof that the vehicle is registered, revising provisions governing certain fees for towing a motor vehicle, requiring the owner of real property or authorized agent of the owner who requests that the vehicle be towed from a residential complex to make reasonable efforts to notify the owner or operator of the vehicle of the date and time after which the vehicle will be towed, requiring the tow operator to independently verify the registration status of a vehicle before towing the vehicle in certain situations, and providing other measures properly and thereto. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 3, end of Section 3, end of bill.
On the amendment, second one of the bill, the whole.
I have Amendment 479, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure.
Assemblywoman Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 479 to Assembly Bill 301.
Assemblywoman Moreno moves. The Assembly adopt Amendment 479 and Assembly Bill 301. Remarks?
The amendment removes the $50 maximum removal fee for vehicles. It allows the proof of current vehicle registration to be provided in physical and electronic formats, and it makes other various changes to the bill.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 479, Assembly Bill 301, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill is ordered. General file.
Assembly Bill 313, introduced by Assemblywoman Hanson, an act relating to common interest communities authorizing the use of electronic ballots for the election and removal of members of the Executive Board of the Unit Owners Association, and for the election of delegates or representatives to exercise the voting rights of units owners and associations, specifying that an association is authorized to conduct a vote for the election or removal of a member of the Executive Board without a meeting, providing that a unit's owner is responsible in certain circumstances for the cost of the deductible of property insurance maintained by an association, authorizing money on the operating account of an association to be withdrawn without the usual required signatures for the purpose of making certain automatic payments, requiring the Commission for Common Interest Communities and Condominium Hotels to adopt regulations establishing the requirements relating to the transfer of certain items upon the termination or assignment of a management agreement, and providing other matters properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 10, end of Section 10, end of bill.
On the amendment, second one of the bill, the whole.
Amendment 360, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 360 to Assembly Bill 313.
Assemblyman Flores moves. The Assembly adopt Amendment 360, Assembly Bill 313. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment provides a method to opt out of electronic voting, requires paper ballots for persons who have not provided an email address, requires the use of a third party to conduct electronic voting, and clarifies a party conducting electronic voting is subject to Nevada law regarding the security and privacy of personal information.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 360 to Assembly Bill 313, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill is ordered. General file.
Assembly Bill 322, introduced by Assemblyman C.H. Miller et al., Senator Harris, an act relating to cannabis, providing for licensure and regulation by the Cannabis Compliance Board of certain events at which the sale and consumption of cannabis or cannabis products is allowed, setting forth certain requirements for the issuance of a license to hold such an event, setting forth certain requirements concerning the operation of such an event, imposing various requirements on persons licensed by the board to hold such an event, providing that persons who hold certain events at which cannabis or cannabis products are displayed for informational or educational purposes are not required to obtain a license, requiring the board to adopt regulations establishing certain fees, revising provisions relating to the consumption of cannabis in a public place, revising provisions relating to the excise tax on retail sales of cannabis and cannabis products, exempting the holders of certain licenses issued by the board from certain provisions, prohibiting a person from maintaining a place for the purpose of unlawfully selling, giving away or using any controlled substance, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 44, end of Section 44, end of bill.
On the amendment, second one of the bill, the whole.
There are none.
The bill is ordered. General file.
Assembly Bill 327, introduced by Assemblyman Torres et al., Senator Doñate, an act relating to mental health, requiring certain mental health professionals to complete continuing education concerning cultural competency and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and providing other matters properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1. Section 8, end of Section 8, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bills at home?
Amendment 243, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Commerce and Labor.
Assemblywoman Hattagi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 243 to Assembly Bill 327.
Assemblywoman Hattagi has moved the Assembly adopt Amendment 243 to Assembly Bill 327. Remarks?
The amendment makes changes regarding cultural competency in continuing education.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 243 to Assembly Bill 327 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill's ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 335, introduced by Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, an act relating to redevelopment, revising the requirements for the submission of an employment plan for a redevelopment project located in certain cities, requiring the developer and certain businesses to submit progress reports related to redevelopment projects in certain cities, requiring the Nevada Commission on Minority Affairs to provide an analysis of employment plans and progress reports related to certain redevelopment projects, and providing other matters properly in thereto. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 9, end of Section 9, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bills at home?
I have Amendment 461, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 461 to Assembly Bill 335.
Assemblyman Flores has moved that the Assembly adopt Amendment 461 to Assembly Bill 335. Remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment revises information contained in employer reports to include information about people with disabilities and all sexes.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 461 to Assembly Bill 335 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill's ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 341, introduced by Assemblyman Yeager, an act relating to cannabis, providing for licensure and regulation by Cannabis Compliance Board of Cannabis Consumption Lounges, setting for certain requirements for the licensure of cannabis consumption lounges, setting for certain requirements for the operation of retail cannabis consumption lounges and independent cannabis consumption lounges, requiring the board to adopt regulations establishing certain fees, revising provisions relating to certain cannabis projects, revising provisions relating to the consumption of cannabis in a public place, revising provisions relating to the excise tax on retail sales of cannabis and cannabis products, exempting a cannabis consumption lounge from certain provisions, prohibiting a person from maintaining a place for the purpose of unlawfully selling, giving away, or using any controlled substance, and providing other measures relating thereto. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 36, end of Section 36, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bills at home?
There are none.
Bill's ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 347, introduced by Assemblyman Licker, an act relating to healthcare, authorizing the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy of the Department of Health and Human Services to impose an assessment on certain healthcare providers, prescribing the authorized uses of the revenue generated by such an assessment, requiring the Division to adopt regulations establishing administrative penalties against a healthcare provider who does not pay an assessment in a timely manner, authorizing the Division to take certain measures to collect an unpaid assessment or administrative penalty, establishing procedures for fixing the rates charged by certain hospitals, independent centers for emergency medical care, surgical centers for ambulatory patients and physicians for certain services, authorizing the imposition of a civil penalty and initiation of disciplinary action against such a facility or a physician who fails to comply with provisions concerning rate fixing, creating certain causes of action to enforce those provisions, and providing other measures properly relating thereto. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 48, end of Section 48, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bills at home?
I have Amendment 345, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Health and Human Services.
Assemblywoman Wynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt Amendment 345 to Assembly Bill 347.
Assemblywoman Wynn has moved the Assembly to adopt Amendment 345 to Assembly Bill 347. Remarks?
The amendment deletes all the existing provisions of the bill and instead requires the Legislative Committee on Healthcare to conduct an interim study.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 345 to Assembly Bill 347 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill's ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 349, introduced by Assemblyman Watts, an act relating to motor vehicles, revising provisions that govern an owner of an old-timer vehicle, street rod, classic rod, or classic car, including providing that such vehicles are exempt from the provisions governing the control of emissions from engines as long as they are not used for general transportation, and further providing that such vehicles which are used for general transportation shall not receive special license plates and instead must comply with the provisions governing the control of emissions from engines, requiring the owner of an old-timer vehicle, straight red, classic red, or classic car to pay a certain fee annually instead of only once, authorizing approved inspectors to work at any authorized inspection station, authorized station, or any class of fleet station or multiple locations of such stations, authorizing the Department of Motor Vehicles to establish a remote sensing system to test the emissions from motor vehicles operating in certain counties, exempting a new motor vehicle from emissions testing for the first 4 years of the life of the motor vehicle, and then requiring that emissions testing be conducted on new motor vehicles annually after the 5th registration of the motor vehicle, prohibiting the State Environmental Commission from issuing certain waivers to the owner of a motor vehicle who performs repairs on the motor vehicle, increasing certain fees relating to emissions testing stations and forms certifying emission control compliance, and providing other measures appropriately thereto. The people of the State of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 11, end of Section 11, end of bill.
On the amendment to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
I have Amendment 375 proposed by the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure.
Assemblywoman Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 375 to Assembly Bill 349.
Assemblywoman Moreno has moved to Assembly adopt Amendment 375 to Assembly Bill 349. Remarks?
The amendment removes street rod from the bill, removes Section 2 from the bill, makes changes to the annual registration fee for electronic admissions, and makes various other changes to the bill.
Any further remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 375 to Assembly Bill 349, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
None.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 359, introduced by Assemblywoman Considine, electing trade practices, providing that it is a deceptive trade practice not to provide certain translations in a language other than English of certain contracts, agreements, or disclosures to certain persons, and providing other measures appropriately thereto. The people of the State of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 22, end of Section 22, end of bill.
Amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
Amendment 471, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Commerce and Labor.
Assemblywoman Howdigy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 471 to Assembly Bill 359.
Assemblywoman Howdigy has moved to Assembly adopt Amendment 471 to Assembly Bill 359. Remarks? There being none, all those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 471 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 360, introduced by Assemblyman Hafen and Hardy, enacting vapor products requiring the manufacturer of vapor products sold in the state to certify that it has complied with certain federal requirements and submit a list of vapor products sold in the state to the Department of Taxation, requiring the Department of Taxation to create and maintain a directory of certain vapor products, prohibiting the sale of vapor products not included in the directory maintained by the department, and providing other measures appropriately thereto. The people of the State of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 4, end of Section 4, end of bill.
Amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
I have Amendment 396 proposed by the Assembly Committee on Revenue.
Assemblywoman Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment Number 396 to Assembly Bill 360.
Assemblywoman Cohen has moved to Assembly adopt Amendment 396 to Assembly Bill 360. Remarks? There being none, all those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 396 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 367, introduced by Assemblywoman Tillis et al., Senators Dennis et al. Enacting education, adding disciplinary studies to the list of core academic subjects that are required to be taught in all public schools, eliminating the requirement that a combined course of American government and economics use an advanced placement curriculum for the American government credit, and providing other measures appropriately thereto. The people of the State of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 2, end of Section 2, end of bill.
Amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
There are none.
Remarks? Assemblywoman Bill Reacts. I'm sorry.
There are
There
no
are none.
amendments to that bill.
The bill's ordered general file. Sorry, I saw somebody light up. I'm sorry.
Assembly Bill 368, introduced by Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson, enacting tourism improvement districts, revising the reporting requirements of the Department of Taxation relating to tourism improvement districts, and providing other measures appropriately thereto. The people of the State of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 4, end of Section 4, end of bill.
Amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a
I have
whole.
Amendment 258, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Revenue.
Assemblywoman Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment Number 258 to Assembly Bill 368.
Assemblywoman Cohen has moved to Assembly adopt Amendment 258 to Assembly Bill 368. Remark? There being none, all in favor of Assembly adopting Amendment 258 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 371, introduced by Assemblywoman Brittany Miller, enacting to education, establishing provisions relating to discrimination based on race, including discrimination based on race and existing law related to bullying and cyberbullying, and providing other measures appropriately thereto. The people of the State of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 29, end of Section 29, end of bill.
Amendment to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
Amendment 305, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Education.
Assemblywoman Bill Reacts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 305 to Assembly Bill 371.
Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod moves the Assembly adopt Amendment 305 to Assembly Bill 371. Remarks? There being none, all in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 305, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill's order general file.
Assembly Bill 376, introduced by Assemblyman Torres et al., Senators Neal et al., and Actling Dead Immigration, enacting the Keep Nevada Working Act, prohibiting certain state and local agencies from performing certain actions relating to immigration enforcement, prohibiting certain state and local law enforcement agencies, school police units, and campus police departments from collecting, using, and providing certain information to federal immigration authorities, requiring state and local enforcement agencies to provide certain disclosures to persons before making inquiries relating to immigration, limiting the circumstances under which a state or local law enforcement agency may permit federal immigration authorities to interview persons who are under state or local custody, prohibiting state or local law enforcement agencies from detaining persons on the basis of a hold request or for the purpose of determining the immigration status of the person, prohibiting a state or local law enforcement agencies from contracting for or otherwise using the language services of federal immigration authorities, creating the Keep Nevada Working Task Force and establishing the powers and duties of the task force and providing other matters properly amended to. The people stated that are represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 30, end of Section 30, end of bill.
Any members, second one of the bill as a whole?
Amendment 212, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 212 to Assembly Bill 376.
Assemblyman Flores moved the Assembly adopt Amendment 212 to Assembly Bill 376. Remarks? There being none, all in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 212, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill's order general file.
Assembly Bill 378, introduced by the Committee on Natural Resources, enacting public lands, revising the purpose of the State Land Office, eliminating provisions relating to the state providing land use planning assistance in areas of critical environmental concern, revising provisions relating to duties of the State Land Use Planning Agency, repealing various provisions relating to public lands, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people stated that are represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 14, end of Section 14, end of bill.
Any members, section one of the bill as a whole?
Amendment 292, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 292 to Assembly Bill 378.
Assemblyman Flores moved the Assembly adopt Amendment 292 to Assembly Bill 378. Remarks? There being none, all in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 292, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill's order general file.
Assembly Bill 379, introduced by Assemblyman C.H. Miller, enacting motor vehicles, removing provisions governing the issuance and display of license plate decals evidencing the current registration of motor vehicle, removing the requirement for a license plate to display the month and year the vehicle registration expires, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 25, end of Section 25, end of bill.
Any members, section one of the bill as a whole?
Amendment 376, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 376 to Assembly Bill 379.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno moved the Assembly adopt Amendment 376 to Assembly Bill 79. Remarks? There being none, all those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 376, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill's order general file.
Assembly Bill 382, introduced by Assemblyman Watts et al., enacting student education loans, providing for the licensing and regulation of student loan services by the Commissioner of Financial Institutions, authorizing and requiring the student loan ombudsman to perform certain acts, providing for the regulation of private education loans and private education lenders by the Commissioner, requiring the Commissioner to adopt certain regulations, establishing certain duties and prohibitions applicable to post-secondary educational institutions and post-secondary vocational institutions, requiring the Commission on Post-Secondary Education to adopt certain standards concerning post-secondary vocational institutions, prohibiting the Commission from delegating certain duties, providing penalty, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people stated that are represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 67, end of Section 67, end of bill.
Any members, section one of the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Bill's order general file.
Assembly Bill 383, introduced by Assemblyman Watts et al., enacting energy, requiring the Director of the Office of Energy to adopt standards of energy efficiency for certain appliances, prohibiting the sale, lease, rental, or installation of certain new appliances that are not in compliance with energy efficiency standards, authorizing the Director to adopt standards of energy efficiency for certain additional appliances, requiring the manufacturer to obtain a certification for certain appliances prior to sale, authorizing the Director to take certain actions to investigate possible violations, establishing a civil penalty for violations violations, authorizing the adoption of compliance standards to facilitate the implementation of flexible demand technology and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 39, end of Section 39, end of bill.
Any members of Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
Amendment 399, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 399 to Assembly Bill 383.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno has moved the Assembly adopt Amendment 399, Assembly Bill 383 remarks. There being none, all those in favor of Assembly adopt Amendment 399, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill's order, general file.
Assembly Bill 384, introduced by Assemblyman Torres et al., enacting the Nevada System of Higher Education, authorizing the Board of Regents of the University of Nevada to provide for the development of a climate survey on sexual misconduct and requiring institutions within the system to administer the survey to students, authorizing the imposition of additional requirements for the grievance process for sexual misconduct at an institution within the system, authorizing the Board of Regents to require each institution within the system to adopt a policy on sexual misconduct, enter into a memorandum of understanding with certain organizations, and designate a victims advocate, prohibiting an institution within the system from imposing certain sanctions on certain students, authorizing the Board of Regents to require an institution within the system to take certain actions regarding a report of an alleged incident of sexual misconduct, providing that certain training and programming relating to sexual misconduct, authorizing the Board of Regents to require a report from institutions within the system on certain information relating to sexual misconduct, authorizing the Board of Regents to impose a fine in certain circumstances, authorizing the Board of Regents to adopt regulations, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 40, end of Section 40, end of bill.
Any members of Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Bill's order, general file.
Assembly Bill 385, introduced by Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson and Brittany Miller, enacting public employment, prohibiting officers and employees of certain public bodies from receiving certain payments or benefits upon termination of employment, establishing the maximum allowed salaries for officers and employees of certain public bodies, including merit-based salary increases and allowances for transportation in the calculation of such an officer or employee's salary for certain purposes, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 3, end of Section 3, end of bill.
Any members of Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
Amendment 309, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 309 to Assembly Bill 385.
Assemblyman Flores moves the Assembly adopt Amendment 309, Assembly Bill 385 remarks. There being none, all in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 309, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill's order, general file.
Assembly Bill 387, introduced by Assemblyman Monroe Moreno et al., enacting midwives, establishing the Board of Licensed Certified Professional Midwives, and requiring the Board to adopt certain regulations, requiring the Division of Public and Behavioral Health of the Department of Health and Human Services to perform certain tasks relating to the regulation of licensed certified professional midwives, providing for licensure of licensed certified professional midwives and the issuance of permits to student midwives, authorizing a licensed certified professional midwife to utilize at birth assistant under certain circumstances, prescribing requirements relating to the practice of midwifery, authorizing a licensed certified professional midwife to possess, administer, and order certain drugs, devices, chemicals, and solutions, exempting a licensed certified professional midwife and other providers of healthcare from certain liability, requiring Medicaid to cover the services of a licensed certified professional midwife, providing penalty, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 107, end of Section 107, end of bill.
Any members of Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Bill's order, general file.
Assembly Bill 388, introduced by Assemblyman C.H. Miller and Duran, enacting telecommunication service, requiring the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada to establish a program to assist certain persons with low income in obtaining access to broadband services, establishing certain requirements for the program, providing for reimbursements to certain providers of telephone services for the reduction in rates of telephone services under certain circumstances, and providing other measures for the thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 8, end of Section 8, end of bill.
Any members of Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Bill's order, general file.
Assembly Bill 391, introduced by Assemblywoman Anderson, an act relating to dispensing of petitions, authorizing the Board of Dispensing of Petitions to employ an executive director, providing immunity from civil liability to the Board and any of its members, staff, and employees for certain acts, expanding the purpose for which the Board is authorized to accept gift, grant, donations, and contributions, requiring the Board to perform certain duties relating to the issuance, renewal, reinstatement, revocation, and suspension of licenses, prescribing requirements for the submission of an application for licensure, requiring the Board to adopt certain regulations relating to licensure, prescribing criteria for eligibility for a licensee for a license as an apprentice dispensing optician, clarifying certain requirements relating to eligibility for a limited license as a dispensing optician, revising criteria for eligibility for a license as a dispensing optician, removing the authority of the board to issue a special license as a dispensing optician, reorganizing certain provisions, increasing the amount of administrative fine for engaging in certain activity without holding a license, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 29, end of Section 29, end of bill.
All right, members, Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
Amendment 366, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Commerce and Labor.
Assemblywoman Howdy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 366 to Assembly Bill 391.
Assemblywoman Howdy, move to Assembly adopt Amendment 366 to Assembly Bill 391. Remarks? There being none, all in favor of Assembly adopting Amendment 366, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 397, introduced by the Committee on Government Affairs, enacting county clerks, requiring the county clerk to pay certain fees to a county treasurer on or before the 5th day of the month, revising the permissible use of certain fees collected by a county clerk, eliminating certain provisions related to the issuance of a marriage license during certain office hours and during other hours by a commercial wedding chapel, requiring that a county clerk in certain counties issue a marriage license during certain hours, making various other changes relating to county clerks, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 7, end of Section 7, end of bill.
Amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
Amendment 340, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 340 to Assembly Bill 397.
Assemblyman Flores, move to Assembly adopt Amendment 340, Assembly Bill 397. Remarks? There being none, all in favor of adopting Assembly Amendment 340, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 399, introduced by the Committee on Natural Resources. Enabling the eggs, prohibiting a farm owner or operator from confining egg-laying hens in an enclosure which is not cage-free housing system or is a cage-free housing system that has insufficient usable floor space for each egg-laying hen, requiring a farm owner or operator to obtain a certificate stating that the egg products or shell eggs sold, offered, or exposed for sale or transported for sale within the state were produced by an egg-laying hen housed in an enclosure that is not prohibited, requiring the payment of an application fee and renewal fee for such certificates, authorizing the State Department of Agriculture to deny, suspend, or revoke a certificate for certain causes, providing for an appeal within 10 business days after such an action, prohibiting a business owner or operator from doing business with a farm owner or operator that does not have a certificate, providing that the department or an authorized inspector or agent of the department is entitled to free access during regular business hours to the farm business records or vehicles of a farm owner or operator or business owner or operator to carry out inspections, authorizing the state quarantine officer to adopt regulations, including regulations establishing reasonable fees and charges, providing that certain civil penalties apply to any person who violates any provisions of this bill, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 24, end of Section 24, end of bill.
Amendment to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
There-
Bills ordered
there-
general. Sorry.
Assembly Bill 408, introduced by Assemblywoman Kasama, enacting taxation and revising provisions relating to the imposition of transient lodging taxes on the gross receipts of remarketers from the reserving of, arranging for, conveying of, or furnishing of the right to use or occupy transient lodging and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 5, end of Section 5, end of bill.
Amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a
I
whole.
have Amendment 310, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 310 to Assembly Bill 408.
Assemblyman Flores moved to Assembly adopt Amendment 310, Assembly Bill 408. Remarks? There being none, all in favor of Assembly adopt Amendment 310, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 410, introduced by the Committee on Government Affairs and Activating Public Works, revising qualifications for entering into a contract with a public body as a construction manager at risk, requiring a contract between a public body and a construction manager as agent to be awarded through a competitive bidding process, removing the prospective expiration of provisions relating to construction managers at risk, and providing other measures properly thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, to enact as follows. Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 7, end of Section 7, end of bill.
On the amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
I have Amendment 295, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblyman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 295 to Assembly Bill 410.
Assemblyman Flores moved to Assembly adopt Amendment 295 to Assembly Bill 410. Remarks? There being none, all those in favor of Assembly adopt Amendment 295, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 413, introduced by the Committee on Growth and Infrastructure, enacting on transportation, requiring the Department of Transportation to establish an advisory working group to study certain issues related to transportation during the 2021-2022 interim, prescribing the duties of the advisory working group and providing other measures appropriately thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in the Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 2, end of Section 2, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 379 proposed by the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 379 to Assembly Bill 413.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno has moved the Assembly adopt Amendment 379 to Assembly 413. Remarks? There being none, all those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 379 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 416, introduced by the Committee on Education, enacting higher education, requiring the legislative auditor to conduct audits of the Nevada system of higher education and providing the most appropriately thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 3, end of Section 3, end of bill.
Amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
Amendment 306, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Education.
Assemblywoman Bill Rivera Axelrod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that we adopt Amendment 306 to Assembly Bill 416.
Assemblywoman Bill Rivera Axelrod moves the Assembly adopt Amendment 306 to Assembly Bill 416. Remarks? There being none, all in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 306 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 417, introduced by the Committee on Education, enacting school buses, requiring written recommendations to correct defects or inspection issues to be submitted with an inspection report to the superintendent of schools of the school district, authorizing recommendations to correct defects or inspection issues to be submitted to the superintendent of schools of the school district or his or her designee, removing the criminal penalty for the superintendent if he or she fails to correct a defect or inspection issue within 10 days after receiving notice, and providing the most appropriately thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 2, end of Section 2, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a
I
whole?
have Amendment 204, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Education.
Assemblywoman Bill Rivera Axelrod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that we adopt Amendment 204 to Assembly Bill 417.
Assemblywoman Bill Rivera Axelrod moves the Assembly adopt Amendment 204 to Assembly Bill 417. Remarks? There being none, all those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 204 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 419, introduced by the Committee on Education, enacting education, establishing various provisions related to the sponsorship and governance of charter schools, requiring the disclosure of certain information related to the management of charter schools, setting forth certain requirements for charter schools that have received certain low ratings of performance on the statewide system of accountability for public schools, prohibiting the approval of an application to form a charter school if the charter school is proposed to be managed by certain operators, and providing the most appropriately thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 14, end of Section 14, end of bill.
Amendment Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
Amendment 424, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Education.
Assemblywoman Bill Rivera Axelrod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that we adopt Amendment 424 to Assembly Bill 419.
Assemblywoman Bill Rivera Axelrod moves the Assembly adopt Amendment 424 to Assembly Bill 419. Remarks? There being none, all those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 424 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 420, introduced by the Committee on Education, enacted relating to educational advising provisions relating to educational management organizations and providing other measures appropriately thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 9, end of Section 9, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 205, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Education.
Assemblywoman Bill Rivera Axelrod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 105 to Assembly Bill 420.
Assemblywoman Bill Rivera Axelrod moves the Assembly adopt Amendment 205 to Assembly Bill 420. Remarks? All those in favor of Assembly adopting Amendment 205 signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 424, introduced by the Committee on Judiciary, enacting criminal procedure, removing a requirement that an arrested person show good cause before being released without bail, requiring courts to conduct a pretrial release hearing to determine custody status of an arrested person, requiring a pretrial release hearing to be held within a reasonable amount of time after a person has been taken into custody, removing mandatory amounts of bail for certain offenses, requiring certain pretrial custody determinations to be made in a specific order of priority, requiring courts to consider certain information in making pretrial custody determinations, affording persons certain rights concerning pretrial release hearings, requiring courts to make specific findings concerning the denial of bail or the imposition of bail or conditions of release, creating a mechanism to bring a person back to court if a person cannot afford the imposed amount of bail or costs associated with conditions of release, and providing other measures appropriately thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 1, Section 15, end of Section 15, end of bill.
Any Any amendments to section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 330 proposed by the Assembly Committee on Judiciary.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move the Assembly adopt Amendment 330 to Assembly Bill 424.
Assemblyman Yeager moves Assembly adopt Amendment 330, Assembly Bill 424. Remarks? There being none, all those in favor of Assembly adopting Amendment 330, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general fund.
Assembly Bill 425, introduced by the Committee on Judiciary, an act relating to criminal procedure, establishing the Criminal Forfeiture Process Act, revising provisions relating to the civil forfeiture of property and proceeds attributable to certain crimes, authorizing the Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission to provide training and certification of peace officers relating to the act, repealing certain provisions relating to property subject to forfeiture, and providing other measures relating thereto. The people stated by the represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 49, end of Section 49, end of bill.
Any amendments to section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 470 proposed by the Assembly Committee on Judiciary.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 470 to Assembly Bill 425.
Assemblyman Yeager moves Assembly adopt Amendment 470, Assembly Bill 425. Remarks? There being none, all in favor of Assembly adopting Amendment 470, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general fund.
Assembly Bill 427, introduced by the Committee on Judiciary, an act relating to public safety, revising provisions relating to the revocation of a license, permit, or privilege of a driver, revising provisions concerning the issuance of a restricted driver's license, authorizing the Department of Motor Vehicles to issue an ignition interlock privilege to certain persons in lieu of a restricted driver's license, establishing provisions concerning ignition interlock devices, requiring the Director of the Department of Motor Vehicles to establish the ignition interlock program and adopt rules and regulations necessary to carry out the program, establishing the account for the ignition interlock program, requiring the Department of Public Safety to adopt regulations establishing certain reasonable fees relating to ignition interlock devices, transferring certain duties from the Committee on Testing for Intoxication to the Department of Public Safety, revising various provisions concerning offenders who committed violation of driving under the influence of alcohol or a prohibited substance, revising provisions relating to the statewide sobriety and drug monitoring program, authorizing a person who commits the first violation within 7 years of driving under the influence of alcohol or a prohibited substance to be sentenced to residential confinement and lieu of imprisonment, revising provisions relating to certain programs of treatment established by courts, providing penalties, and providing other measures relating thereto. The people's state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 46, end of Section 46, end of bill.
Any amendments to section 1 of the bill as a whole?
Amendment 206, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Judiciary.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 206 to Assembly Bill 427.
Assemblyman Yeager moves Assembly adopt Amendment 206, Assembly Bill 426. Remarks? 427. There being none, all those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 206, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general fund.
Assembly Bill 429, introduced by the Committee on Growth and Infrastructure, and act relating to motor vehicles, establishing provisions governing the licensing and operation of the peer-to-peer car-sharing program and providing other measures relating thereto. The people's state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 33, end of Section 33, end of bill.
Any amendments to section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 380, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 380 to Assembly Bill 429.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno moved that the Assembly adopt Amendment 380 to Assembly Bill 429. Remarks? There being none, all those in favor of the Assembly adopt Amendment 380, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general fund.
Assembly Bill 440, introduced by the Committee on Judiciary, an act relating to crimes defining the terms aggregate offense and crime of violence, requiring a peace officer to issue a misdemeanor citation in lieu of executing a warrant by arresting the defendant if the warrant is issued upon an offense punishable as a misdemeanor and the offense does not constitute an aggregate offense or a crime of violence, requiring certain persons to issue misdemeanor citations, traffic citations, vessel citations, or wildlife citations under certain circumstances for offenses punishable as misdemeanors that do not constitute aggregate offenses for crimes of violence, and providing other measures relating thereto. The people's state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 26, end of Section 26, end of bill.
On amendment to section 1 of the bill as a whole.
Amendment 331, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Judiciary.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move the Assembly adopt Amendment 331 to Assembly Bill 440.
Assemblyman Yeager moved that the Assembly adopt Amendment 331 to Assembly Bill 440. Remarks? All those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 331, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bills ordered general fund.
Assembly Bill 442, introduced by the Committee on Commerce and Labor, and act relating to healthcare, requiring certain providers of healthcare to complete training in the screening, brief intervention, and referral to treatment approach to substance use disorder, authorizing such a provider of healthcare to use such training to complete certain continuing education requirements, authorizing a physician assistant, or advanced practice registered nurse to use a federal registration to dispense narcotic drugs for maintenance treatment or detoxification treatment to satisfy certain continuing educational requirements and providing other matters properly in there too. The people's state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 54, end of Section 54, end of bill.
Any members of Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 245 proposed by the Assembly Committee on Commerce and Labor.
Assemblywoman Howdy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 245 to Assembly Bill 442.
Assemblywoman Howdy has moved. Assembly adopt Amendment 245 to Assembly Bill 442. Remarks? There being none, all those in favor, Assembly adopt Amendment 245, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill's ordered general fund.
Assembly Bill 444, introduced by the Committee on Growth and Infrastructure, enacting limousines, authorizing a transportation network company to contract with a limousine motor carrier to provide limousine services through use of the digital network or software application service of the transportation network company, and providing other rules for the lane thereto. The people's state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 15, end of Section 15, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 382, proposed by the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure.
Assemblywoman Barone Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Amendment 382 to Assembly Bill 444.
Assemblywoman Barone Moreno has moved. Assembly adopt Amendment 382 to Assembly Bill 444. Remarks? There being none, all those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 382, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill's ordered general fund.
Assembly Bill 445, introduced by the Committee on Growth and Infrastructure, enacting financial administration, transferring the Office of Grant Procurement Coordination and Management in the Department of Administration to the Office of the Governor, renaming the Office of as the Office of Federal Assistance, requiring the Governor to appoint a director of the office, requiring the director to develop a state plan for maximizing federal assistance, revising the duties of the office relating to the procurement, coordination, and management of federal assistance, creating the Nevada Grant Matching Program to provide funds to certain public agencies, tribal governments, and nonprofit organizations as matching funds for federal grants, requiring that certain money from the abandoned property trust account be transferred to a trust fund established as part of the program, revising the membership and duties of the Nevada Advisory Council on Federal Assistance, and providing the rules properly thereto. The people's state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 34, end of Section 34, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 359 proposed by the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs.
Assemblywoman Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 359 to Assembly Bill 445.
Assemblywoman Flores has moved. Assembly adopt Amendment 359, Assembly Bill 445. Remarks? There being none, all in favor of Assembly adopt Amendment 359, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill's ordered general fund.
Assembly Bill 56, introduced by the Committee on Education, enacting to education, establishing the account for instruction on Holocaust and genocide in the State General Fund, requiring the Board of Trustees of a school district, the governing body of a charter school, and the governing body of a university school for profoundly gifted pupils to ensure instruction on the Holocaust and genocide is provided to pupils enrolled in high schools, and providing other matters properly in there too. The people's state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 4, end of Section 4, end of bill.
Any amendments to Section 1 of the bill as a
I
whole?
have Amendment 399 proposed by the Assembly Committee on Education.
Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 299 to Assembly Bill 56.
Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod moves. Assembly adopt Amendment 299, Assembly Bill 56. Remarks? There being none, all those in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 299, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill is ordered to general file.
Assembly Bill 86, introduced by the Committee on Government Affairs, enacting wildfires, revising provisions relating to the recovery of expenses incurred by certain governmental entities in extinguishing a fire or meeting an emergency, authorizing county, cities, and certain general improvement districts to bring in action to recover certain expenses related to wildfires, and providing other measures properly in there too. The people's state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 5, end of Section 5, end of bill.
Amendment to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
I have Amendment 120 proposed by Assemblywoman Peters.
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adopt Amendment 120 to Assembly Bill 86.
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson moves. Assembly adopt Amendment 120, Assembly Bill 86. Remarks? There being none, all in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 120, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
Bill's ordered general file.
Assembly Bill 118, introduced by Assemblyman Bilber Axelrod et al., enacting motor vehicles, revising provisions relating to the transportation of children in motor vehicles, and providing other measures properly in there too. The people's state of Nevada represented in Senate and Assembly to enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 4, end of Section 4, end of bill.
Amendment to Section 1 of the bill as a whole.
I have Amendment 462 proposed by the Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod.
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the Assembly adopt Amendment 462 to Assembly Bill 118.
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson moves. The Assembly adopt Amendment 462 to Assembly Bill 118. Remarks? There being none, all in favor of the Assembly adopting Amendment 462, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill?
Or no?
The bill is ordered general file. Assemblywoman Carlton. We're going to order business 8.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Order of Business 8, to say the least.
Order business 8.
So there's 33 of them here. I'll read them slow. So, Assembly Bill 29, 56, 61, 90, 133, 161, 170, 194, 196, 213, 220, 224, 262, 270, 280, 299, 315, 321, 340, 347, 348, 349, 356, 371, 379, 383, 408, 416, 418, 425, 427, 429, and 445, all reported out on second reading, be referred to your Committee on Ways and Means.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Motion carries. We would go to order of business 15 if we are able. Remarks. I will say before anybody lights up, if there was ever an example of our chief clerk's staff and our chief clerk showing that they are here to serve you and this state, tonight was that example. If we could all give them a hand. I only cut off the applause because it just means they're going to have to be here that much longer. I want to point out, and it's so that we're all considerate, not only does our chief clerk and our staff work hard to get us ready, but we leave and they work hard to clean this up. And so please be appreciative of everything that they do for us to make this all work. We could not do this without them. And for those of you who've been in other states, there's no chief clerk staff like our chief clerk staff. You can ask anybody in any other state. So with that, we will be in order of business 15. I know everybody's tired. I think tonight's long night is a testament to our work. And of course, today we mourn the loss of our own Marshila Lyons. I struggle to think of what to say after that because, sometimes the loss is just too great. The hurt is just too deep. The pain is just too intense. But Marshila experienced all of these things far more than any one person should have had to endure. So if she could be strong through it all, if she could help this institution for all those years that she had, if she could do that while also tending to her family tragedies over the past several years, if she could work for all of you until her final weeks out of love and dedication for this state and this institution, then we can be strong in her honor. Marshila was not just our deputy research director. She was my friend, and whether you knew it or not, she was your friend. She prayed for me, and whether or not you knew it, she prayed for you too. She was not just someone who worked here and helped us get our work done. She was a wife and a mother, a woman of faith and principle. There's not much more one can say about someone who is simply an angel in our midst. I would urge everyone to hug your loved ones just a little tighter, engage with your colleagues a little more kindly, and treat this institution with a little more reverence, remembering that the people who work for us here have no agenda other than making sure that even through their last days, Nevada is able to endure. We love you, Marshila. We will miss you terribly, and we know that you're at peace now and no more pain. Assemblyman Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask the members of the body to join me in a prayer for Marshila. Father God, we come to you this evening with heavy hearts as we mourn the loss of our very own Marshela Lyons. We thank you for the gift that she was to her family, friends, her colleagues, this body, and our state. We know that according to her faith, you know the precise time to call us home and deliver us from the sufferings of this world. We know that according to her faith, to be absent from the body is to be present with you, Lord. And we know that according to her faith, we have hope that we will see our loved ones again. So through this difficult time, please help us to find the joy needed to celebrate the gift and blessing she was to the rest of us as we look forward to seeing her again. We ask you to comfort her family and friends like only you can. Please heal the broken hearts of her loved ones and provide wise counsel to help the minds of those of us that have a hard time understanding your ways in times like these. Father God, I ask you to release your peace that passes all understanding to the family of Marshela Lyons and everyone that know and love her. In Jesus' name, amen.
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly adjourn.
I think we have a little bit. Can we 1 minute recess?
1 minute recess.
Before, we're going to go to order of business A briefly, but I want to remind members for tomorrow's purposes, and you'll understand after the next order of business 8, please keep your amendments on your desk, because that's going to be what we're going to have to be working off of for tomorrow. So we'll go back to order of business 8. Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Under order business A, to move to dispense with further reprinting of the bills.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We go back to order business 15. Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Seeing no other business before us, I would move that the Assembly adjourn in the appreciation of the more than 20 years of service that Marshela Lyons gave to the state, that we adjourn in memory of her kind, her intelligent, and her beautiful soul, her soul that has peace. I move that the comment made by my colleague from the South in his prayer be entered into the record, into today's record. I move that we stand adjourned until Tuesday, April 21st, 2021 at the hour of 11:30 a.m.
I think it's the 20th.
20th,
At what hour, sorry?
11:30 a.m.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We are adjourned.